Hello again, welcome. My name is Josh, and this is the 7th part of my vlog series of the various horror films I'm watching for the month of October of 2023. And this particular day, the 7th of October, I watched, it was going to be my 80s slasher. I tried to, unofficially rules of this thing, of this marathon I always have for myself, is I try to get a film from every decade. The silent era is a bit nebulous, so I usually just consider the silent, a horror film from the silent period, regardless of whether it was the teens, the 20s, or I think 1930. I don't remember if sound came out, if sound was popularized by 31 or 1930, but anyway, that whole period is, for sake of argument, for the sake of this marathon, is one decade, and then obviously you have the 30s, 40s, 50s, so on and so forth. And then, of course, I also try to do like a Universal movie, or I might try to do a slasher movie in there. Some of the big movements in horror film history, as well as just an example from each decade. It doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes I try to pick ones, and then I realize this doesn't quite fit. And so this film was supposed to be my 80s slasher, but it wasn't made in the 80s. It was made in the mid-90s, actually, and that is Garden Tool Massacre. This is a British film, a shot-on-video film, which is a genre, for lack of a better term, that I've only really just been starting to get into. Basically, the idea was, relatively decent quality video cameras were starting to become commercially available in the 80s and into the 90s, and so it was a good way, if you were an aspiring filmmaker, to cheaply make a film using VHS cassette, and then you could, through some process, I don't entirely understand how that worked, you could market this film that you made. Once all was said and done. And I don't have a lot to say about the movie, other than it's not very good. There are parts of it that are like so bad it's good, but a lot of it's just kind of boring. But I'm not going to talk a lot about that because it was a movie made by a 15-year-old. And it feels kind of like a cheap shot for, an adult to be like making fun of or talking bad about a film made by a kid. This particular person, I have never seen any of his other films, but is now a professional filmmaker. I'm sure you can just Google Garden Tool Massacre director and find out who he was. Apparently this was this was 2 short films he made. Both has like a fun project, and then apparently one was a school project, and then he figured out a way to kind of stitch them together into one feature-length film, and then apparently tried to distribute that through mail-in catalogs and stuff like that. Apparently sold a couple tapes. And then nothing else came of it until he started to become somebody in England as a horror film director, and then I guess he was approached by SRS Home Video, and they produced this very nice, very lovely DVD. One thing that was really cool about this, though, and I'll talk a lot about this, is I don't usually listen to commentaries. I don't watch commentaries. It's kind of odd, I'm not a filmmaker personally. I don't consider myself to be a filmmaker, but I have a lot of my friends who are filmmakers, working at a level not too much above this, So I've been involved in a lot of film shoots since I was in high school. In fact, I've even done, I'm 38 years old. I did like 3 film shoots this year, and probably at least one more next year. Um, so I am not a filmmaker. I don't consider myself to be a filmmaker, but I have some experience in making ultra low micro budget films. Um, Dating back to, like I said, high school, college days till now. And in this commentary, this guy talks about, the director talks about all of the trials and tribulations that come with being a director when all you have to work with is, other teenagers, your friends. You're not paying anybody because, you have a budget of about $5 and that all went to go get fake blood. It's just, to me, it was very interesting to hear someone else's perspective on part of a life that I have at least tapped into a few times, not necessarily lived. So that part was really cool. He talks about like, there's one female character in this movie. But there was supposed to be a lot more, and it's not because there was, they didn't drop out because of, anything questionable that was happening in the movie, because they were all teenagers. But they dropped out because they got like camera shy, and it's like I've been in film projects or worked on film projects where like halfway through the movie falls apart because half the cast just kind of disappears, or for one reason or another. I was involved in a web series a friend of mine was trying to make like 10 years ago. And was in college at this time. He was still in high school. Most of his cast was high school kids. And he was super ambitious with his plan for this web series. And he wanted to film it all in a week. But, nobody really knew what they were doing. And once the week was up, the girls' parents would not let them come back because they had, essentially built around they had scheduled out their whole summer, camps and whatever else they were into. And even though they would be around for other weeks, they wouldn't let the kids be involved in the filming because, they'd already allowed them to have this 1 week of filming. And they just, weren't going to let him come back for any other weeks. And so the entire project pretty much just fell apart. And before anyone asks, I grew up with a lot of, like, really conservative Christian types. So weird parents was not an unusual thing. Weird, like, restrictions on things that, other people would be like, that's kind of odd. We did have one person in this project who had some actual professional experience, and this was another issue with this project and why it kind of fell apart. Had some actual professional filmmaking experience. He had apparently worked on a couple of music videos, and later on went on and made a documentary that won several awards locally and abroad. Not going to name names because, the person, I'm still Facebook friends with this person. They might see this and they realize I was talking about them. But he was a little full of himself. And we were filming in my friend's house. I was not there for this day, but I heard about it from him. They were filming in my friend's house. And it was supposed to be a bar scene, but it was like their living room. And he spent all day setting up a single shot, which is not unusual for a professional movie production or something like that, but you have a lot more time. But he spent all day setting up for one shot. They planned to film all day. And I think they got a couple of shots done. And the most ridiculous thing he asked for was he wanted someone to be focus puller on the camera. Now, in a movie set, sometimes the cameras are very large, or the lenses are very big, or the equipment parts of the camera are all different, and you sometimes will have multiple people operating the camera, not just the person filming it. Um, and what they were using was a little like digital camcorder, like just little thing, not much like bigger than this. It was a little box, and he wanted someone to be his focus puller because he couldn't just go and do this. Because that's not professional, I guess. I don't, but so that and this weird thing with, half the cast not being able to return, that just made that project just completely fall apart. But, he would tell in the documentary for this movie, he would tell stories like this about, making movies and, when you have no budget and you're pretty much, begging your friends to help you, like I said, to me, I found that fascinating. I found that interesting, having experienced some of that myself. And so I can't really recommend the movie. I mean, if you like So Bad It's Good, there's some of that in here. There's some interesting things in here. Certainly, watch it for that. The cover is gorgeous. I mean, if you like movie covers, definitely get that, or at least find a copy of the cover online and save that or something. But I do recommend the commentary track. Just especially if you're curious about what's it like, when you're just kind of starting out and you have no money and you're a filmmaker, or what's it like if you're a filmmaker and you're like a teenager, and you're just trying to get experience and hey, let's just make a movie, and you never did that, you didn't know anyone who's ever done that, and you're just curious what that's like. Like I said, the commentary on this is phenomenal, is great for just stuff like that, just stories about making this movie and all the weird trials